Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about the meteoric rise of 17-year-old Indian chess player D Gukesh. We also give you a quick update on Rahul Gandhi's visit to his Lok Sabha constituency, Wayanad. But first, we talk about the complete overhaul of India's criminal laws. On Friday, Union Home Minister Amit Shah introduced 3 bills in the Lok Sabha to replace India's colonial era criminal laws: the Indian Penal Code, the Code of Criminal Procedure, and the Indian Evidence Act.
अंग्रेजों द्वारा बनाए गए, अंग्रेजों की संसद के द्वारा पारित किए गए ये तीनों कानूनों को समाप्त कर आज हम तीनों नए कानून पुरस्कृत करने के लिए मैं आया.
During the introduction, Shah said that the British enacted these laws to strengthen their colonial administration, and the main aim of these laws were to punish people rather than providing justice, and that the new bills will seek to do the exact opposite.
ये कानूनों का उद्देश्य किसी को दंड देना नहीं होगा. इन कानूनों का उद्देश्य सबको न्याय देना होगा.
To know more about the changes that these bills seek to bring and how they will affect the criminal justice system, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to the Indian Express's Apurva Vishwanath in this segment.
So Apurva, could you begin by telling us what do these 3 bills do to India's existing criminal laws?
So, Shashank, this is one step in the ambitious decolonizing project that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been talking about. This is something that he mentioned in his Independence Day speech last year, and it was one of the 5 promises he made about coming out of the shadow of colonial legacy. One of them was to say that what we have is a set of penal laws that were drafted by the British and which haven't been substantially changed or tinkered with since they were originally enacted in the 19th century. So Union Home Minister Amit Shah, the former Law Minister Kiran Rijiju, they all have been talking about a complete overhaul of criminal laws, indigenizing them, bringing them in line with the Indian spirit and ethos. And it was with this context and this line of thought that the Home Minister introduced 3 legislations that would repeal and replace the Indian Penal Code, which was a law enacted in 1860, the Code of Criminal Procedure, which was originally enacted in 1898, but post-independence, we've had the law changed substantially a couple of times. So the latest version that we follow is actually from 1973, and the Indian Evidence Act. So these are 3 legislations that will now be replaced by new laws, which are being called the Sanhitas. The code would now be called a Sanhita. So the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita would replace the Indian Penal Code. The Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita would replace the Code of Criminal Procedure. The Bharatiya Sakshya Sanhita would replace the Indian Evidence Act.
Right, and when we talk about replacing and overhauling these criminal laws, to what extent do these bills actually propose to do that? To what extent will they overhaul them?
So it was last week on Friday that we first saw copies of this new bills, right? So the 3 bills, when you look at it, we've not examined them in complete detail. What we know so far is that the major or substantial changes are to the Indian Penal Code. So the replacement law, that is the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, that has to a great extent introduced new ideas and there are changes made to certain laws. The Code of Criminal Procedure also has seen some changes, but not major or substantial, some additions here and there. The Indian Evidence Act largely remains the same. So what we've done is taken the existing laws and given them changes here and there. That's what we see in these 3 bills.
And while introducing the bills, Amit Shah said that the law on sedition has been repealed. He said that this was one of the biggest examples of this decolonizing process. But we understand that this is not exactly the case, that it has actually been introduced under a new name. So tell us, in what way does the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita bill do that?
So section 124A of the IPC deals with sedition right now. The provision is under stay and it's inoperable right now due to a judgment of the Supreme Court. So the government had told even the Supreme Court that they would relook and re-examine this provision. So Amit Shah stood up in Parliament and said the government has decided to do away with the law on sedition.
इसके पहले क्या था? राजद्रोह था. इसके पहले क्या था? खजाने की लूट थी. इसके पहले क्या था? शासन के अधिकारी पर हमला था. ये जो अप्रोच है, ये अप्रोच को हम बदल रहे हैं.
So Shah in fact said that sedition has no place in a democracy, and in a democracy everyone has a right to free speech and a citizen can say whatever they want to. But what we have is a new provision in the Nyaya Sanhita, which of course does not use the word sedition, but it expands the provision to include under its definition aiding through financial means and acts of subversive activities or those encouraging feelings of separatist activities. Again, one of the main criticism about our current sedition law, is that it contains these very vague and overbroad terms which can be interpreted in a number of ways, where ordinary free speech, well-meaning criticism can come under the ambit of seditious law. So although you remove the name, the use of these overbroad, vague words has not really gone away. In fact, new words have been added to it. So that's still something that we'll have to look into, how far it's repealing and replacing or doing away with the law of sedition.
Right, and as far as the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita bill is concerned, the other thing that we have seen under it is that new offences have been introduced, which weren't there earlier. Could you talk about what some of these new offences are?
Right. So among, the first set of changes is laws which the courts have declared unconstitutional. Say section 377 of the IPC, which criminalized homosexuality. That of course doesn't find mention in the new legislation that has been proposed. And say, for example, the attempt to commit suicide, which again the Supreme Court had decriminalized, that is not in the law per se. But there are other ways in which, say, the attempt to suicide has been reintroduced. There is a provision which says that attempt to suicide with an intention to stop a public official from discharging his duty. Take for example, during a protest, a protester is demanding something of the government and says he will self-immolate. That could come under this definition. Or for example, someone going on a hunger strike in front of the collector's office. They could come under this definition. So there are these curious reintroductions, although the main provision which has been understood to be defunct has not found mention in as many words. Among the other main additions, you could say, a provision which criminalizes deceitful promise to marry a woman. So this provision has a lot of consequences. For example, we've seen this in the whole set of anti-conversion laws that several BJP-ruled states have passed, including UP and Gujarat, where they talk about concealing the identity in order to marry, right? That could come under the purview of this law. And just breaking a promise to marry. This is two consensual adults who, for example, cohabit, and then when they decide not to get married, a man could be charged under this provision for breaking that promise to marry. Courts have been grappling with this issue for quite some time now to distinguish what are genuine cases of misrepresentation and sexual assault for that matter, but also to draw the line between a consensual relationship then failing and not ending in marriage. So that comes under the realm of private activity, which criminal law should not be governing. But this introduction of this law is again very consequential.
Yeah, and apart from the changes that you mentioned, this bill also codifies offences linked to mob lynching and hate crimes. Could you talk about what this bill proposes in that regard?
Yeah, so the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita actually addresses or recognizes for the first time murder based on factors such as race, caste, community or personal belief. Although they don't use the words lynching or mob lynching, but this provision could pretty much deal with incidents such as mob lynching and hate crimes which result in murder. But how the provision has been placed in the new code is very interesting because it says this is murder, but when committed by a group of 5 or more individuals, and the punishment prescribed for this is imprisonment of 7 years to life imprisonment. Right now, what we would do under the IPC is that the man would be booked for murder, when he's accused of such a crime, which is 302 of the IPC, along with other provisions which are in the nature of promoting religious enmity or hate or public disorder. So say section 153A of the IPC read with 302 of the IPC. That's how we would construct it right now. But it is significant that there is recognition that some crimes, some murders happen solely on the grounds of race, caste and community. But it also offers a slightly lower sentence for that matter, because murder is 10 years, but this new provision says 7 years to life. So it is the judge's discretion to award either 7 years of imprisonment, which could of course go up to life. But right now what happens is 302 is 10 years. It would be 10 years up to life. So that is a crucial difference. Of course, under our current laws, we've not seen a lot of convictions in these cases of mob violence, because it's often very difficult to pinpoint that one person who actually committed the murder. So this provision, which specifically aims to address such situations, the acknowledgement indeed goes a long way in recognizing that such crimes do happen and they're different from ordinary murders.
And Apurva, this bill also introduces community services as an alternative form of punishment. What sort of offences will this apply to?
Yeah, so this is one of the significant innovations that we see in the new IPC. So far, what we know as forms of punishment are jail sentences, that is imprisonment, or a fine, which is in the nature of a penalty. And beyond that, we don't really have any other way of punishing individuals committing crimes, right? But what we also know is a statistic that about 2/3 of our population in prisons is of under trials. So this overcrowding of prisons is indeed an issue that needed to be addressed. So it's very innovative that the new IPC offers community service as an alternate form of punishment for some crimes. Although you would think that a lot of petty offenses would be given this alternate form of punishment. But as of now, there's no clear rationale as to which crimes have been identified to be deserving of community service and not a higher sentence. Like, for example, right now the sentence is that it could be an imprisonment of up to 2 years in jail or a fine or both. But now the new code says 2 years of jail or a fine or community service, which means that if a judge wanted, Rahul Gandhi could have gotten off with some community service if he were tried under the new law. But on the other hand, say for offenses like public nuisance, right, which is a very petty crime. Take, for example, something like peeing in public or these crimes, which are often charged under public nuisance. Those don't carry community service as an alternate punishment. So it's unclear how the lawmakers decided which crime should get community service and which shouldn't. It's not a uniform yardstick that they have picked clearly.
Okay, so we have discussed sedition. We have discussed these new offenses that have been introduced related to mob lynching and hate crimes, and also community services as an alternative form of punishment. And there are also other changes that we will be discussing on the podcast in the coming days. But the other major change has taken place in the Criminal Procedure Code. Tell us what that has been.
So the bill that seeks to replace the CRPC is curiously called the Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita. So it's not a literal translation for Code of Criminal Procedure, if you notice. It says that it's the Suraksha Sanhita, Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita. Because Amit Shah, like he said in his speech in the Lok Sabha, these laws seek to put the citizen at the center of these legislations rather than allow wider powers that are prone to misuse for the investigative agencies.
इसमें महिलाओं का और बच्चों का विशेष ध्यान दिया गया है। अपराधियों को सजा हो इसकी चिंता की गई है और पुलिस अपने अधिकारों का दुरुपयोग न कर पाए, ऐसा भी है। इसके अंदर
But what we see, the one big introduction to this new CRPC is the power to conduct trials in absentia for all crimes, which means, if an accused is absconding, the police now have a duty to pick him up, present him before the court. The trial cannot take place until you have the accused physically present in court. The new addition to the Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita actually allows trials in absentia. And in this context, what Amit Shah mentioned in Parliament was the example of Dawood Ibrahim. He said that these people are not in India, but under the new code, people like Dawood Ibrahim can be tried and convicted.
So would this apply to people like Nirav Modi, Mehul Choksi and Vijay Mallya, for example?
Yes, it would be so, because the provision says that for all crimes, trial in absentia can take place, which means if an accused is missing or is absconding 90 days from the date of filing of charges, then the court can proceed with the trial as if the accused has waived his right to a free trial. So one immediate result of this you would see is it gives the police very little incentive to find the right person who's accused of the crime and pick him up and produce in court. But our courts are also heavily reliant on physical presence. That is why we have the problem of too many arrests. We need people in custody to interrogate, investigate the crime and things like that. So how that provision on trial in absentia will play out is very crucial.
Right, the accused being part of the process, this is one of the key things that are supposed to happen in a trial right now. So what concerns do you think it raises now that the person being accused is no longer required in the court?
So the rights of an accused also, apart from, being part of due process, serves another important purpose, which is ensuring that there is some liability on the police to do a good job, to be accountable. It holds the police accountable. The court will see the accused and say, you found this right person, and the accused is given a chance to defend himself. So deeming that the accused has waived that right could have serious consequences on this accountability on the police as well. It might very easily give closure to the victim and the case by convicting a person in his absence. But does it increase the chance of the police not working hard enough to find the right guy? That is something that we'll have to see.
And Apurva, India's criminal laws do require changes, and many of these have been recommended by experts and commissions over the years. Have these bills taken those recommendations into account?
So, Shashank, there is little debate whether India's criminal justice system needs an overhaul. It's so tried to talk about these issues of long delays in court hearings, gaps in investigation, lack of processes to collect evidence, and so many things. So it's not a question of whether these changes are required or not, but are these the right changes? Are these the changes that address these pressing gaps that we have in our justice system? That's the question, really. The biggest problems we talk about every day are the misuse of the power to arrest, the state's wide power to hold people in custody without actually pressing charges on them, the delays in filing the charge sheet, the fact that these charges don't hold up in an actual trial. So these are things where you need to put limits on the state's power to potentially misuse them. Have those things changed? Not really. We've had experts who've written for us in the Indian Express, like Professor Anup Surendranath of National Law University, Delhi, who say that some of those gaps still remain. So those are not the issues that the three bills address. However, these three new laws should not be seen as a culmination of changing everything that was wrong with our laws, right? That's perhaps a stepping stone, the first step towards that process. But the intent of the government that Amit Shah repeatedly said in the parliament is to make sure that these laws are not just to punish the citizens, but to actually provide justice.
And next we talk about the meteoric rise of 17-year-old Indian chess player D Gukesh. Earlier this month, Gukesh surpassed his mentor Vishwanathan Anand to become the top-ranked Indian chess player in live world ratings when he defeated Misraddin Iskandarov of Azerbaijan at the World Cup in Baku. His latest feat paves the way for him to become the top-ranked Indian chess player at the end of this month when the International Chess Federation, or FIDE, publishes its world rankings. When that happens, it will be the first time in 36 years that an Indian player will surge ahead of Anand in the published rankings. In this segment, the Indian Express's Amit Kamath joins us to talk about Gukesh's career and how Indian chess has evolved over the years. So Amit, here's this 17-year-old who's managed to surpass India's first and most celebrated grandmaster, right, Vishwanathan Anand. How did he get here and why is his win so significant?
So Gukesh is somebody who started very young, as a lot of chess players do. But the thing that separates him maybe is that at the age of 17 is already risen to being the country's top ranked chess player in the live ratings at least. When he did rise to the top, there were a lot of people saying almost the same thing, that the era of teenage prodigies has begun in India. And I'll tell you why people are saying that. Because in India, what has happened is there was Vishwanathan Anand, who was the country's top-ranked grandmaster, who's been there at the top since late 1980s. Once, very briefly in 2016, he was overtaken by another player called Pentala Harikrishna. That was for a few days. After that, Anand went back to the top. And so this will be the first time in 36 years when the September rankings come out that there'll be an Indian player ahead of Vishwanathan Anand in the rankings. I mean, it's one of those moments that we talk about in sport. The passing of the baton, if you will, the passing of the flag, if you will, whatever you want to call it.
Okay, and how does one actually become a chess prodigy? Did Gukesh have a very conventional childhood?
So, obviously, when you are trying to raise a prodigy, you need to go off the beaten track a little bit, right? In his family, there are not too many people who played chess professionally, but all of them used to play chess as a hobby. So, Gukesh was somebody who picked up chess at the age of 6 in the family itself. And once he did, there was kind of no looking back. Like his mother recollects, when we spoke to her, his mother Padma told us that, this boy, he picked up the moves very quickly. And what convinced them that he's a natural was that he started making moves really aggressively right from the start. And that kind of told them that there is something in this boy that is best suited for chess. Now, they put him in school, and in the first standard itself, his first extracurricular activities coach, Mr. Bhaskar, he sees that this boy has some sort of a talent. Like even in first standard, you know how we are in the first standard. We would be fidgety, we'd be restless, we'd always be on the balls of our feet. But this kid, there is something very different about him. Every time you set him a task, irrespective of how long it takes him to finish that task, he'd be rooted, he'd be moved on that seat, he'd not move at all. So that was when they started to realize that there is something different about him.
Right. And Amit, Gukesh gave up formal schooling pretty early on, right after fourth standard. When you spoke to him and members of his family, how did they say that impacted their lives?
That is just the kind of thing that you have to do, right? I mean, when you are trying to chase something as unique as being a grandmaster in chess, his father, he used to be a renowned ENT surgeon back in Chennai. Helping Gukesh chase his dream also kind of required a lot of sacrifices from the father, who for the last 5-6 years has not actually had a practice. He's given up on the practice and he's basically started living with Gukesh, going from one country to the other. When we spoke to the mother, Padma, she told us that she's not really met Gukesh a whole lot over the years because, I mean, he's obviously traveling from one country to another, chasing tournaments, chasing victories, chasing points. So that is something, I mean, the whole family has had to do. Over the last few years, his coaches tell me that everything that Gukesh does throughout the course of the day is looking at what makes him a better chess player. He goes to the gym, he's only gymming, thinking about how much his body will need to be fit so that he can sit on the seat and play chess.
Right. And can you tell us what's next for Gukesh?
Right. So we are recording this on a Sunday. Just yesterday, he rose up to the world number 7 in the live rankings. Now, I know a lot of headlines were made when, we say that he's gone ahead of Vishwanathan Anand as the country's top-ranked chess player. But I was very pleasantly surprised when I asked Gukesh this, what his targets were for 2023 before. I think I asked him this in June. And he told me that, going ahead of Anand would be nice. It would be great. But that's not one of his goals for the year. His goals for the year was making it to the candidates tournament, which he's very close to making. The candidates tournament is one of the tournaments which gets a challenger for the world championship. So he wants to make that cut and he wanted to break into the world's top 10, which he's already assured himself of doing.
And finally, Amit, you said earlier that his win sort of heralds this era of Indian prodigies. How has chess evolved over the years and where is it headed?
So there are a bunch of reasons for why we have this crazy bunch of teenage prodigies coming out of India. But before I get that, let me just give you a small hint of where we are going as a chess playing nation. At the ongoing World Cup in Baku, there are 16 players still playing. Out of those, 4 are Indians And 3 of those are teenage chess players from India, including Gukesh, including Pragyananda and Arjun Ergaisi. Now, all 3 of these are 17 and 18-year-old kids from India. Now, one of the reasons why these kids have come up is obviously they are somebody who started learning chess from top players, because what happened is between Anand and between this bunch of prodigiously talented teenagers, there was a whole bunch of grandmasters who didn't really make the cut for the top world championship cycles, for the candidates tournaments and things like that. But what they did was they started academies, they started teaching kids. And now because of the internet, what has happened is even if you are a kid in, let's say, a third tier city or tier 4 city, in whatever township, whatever village you can imagine, as long as you have a good internet connection, you can actually be getting training from one of the top GMs in the country or even abroad. So that knowledge gap is kind of reduced. Also, guys like Vishwanath and Anand used to learn chess from reading chess books. And those books used to be published every, I think, 3 months, 6 months, it used to be published. You had to get those books only by sea. So by the time you got the books, those books were already outdated because a new version had come out. For these kids, none of that matters because, it's all on the internet.
And in the end, we give you a quick update on Rahul Gandhi's visit to Wayanad. On Saturday, the senior Congress leader Rahul Gandhi visited his Lok Sabha constituency where he mounted a scathing attack on Prime Minister Narendra Modi over the Manipur issue, alleging that the Prime Minister was not a nationalist. Addressing a gathering at a rousing reception in Wayanad's Kalpetta, Rahul charged, and I quote, "I said in Parliament a few days back that BJP has killed the idea of India in Manipur. What has happened in Manipur is murder of Bharat Mata. You have destroyed thousands of families, allowed rapes of women," unquote. The Congress leader said the idea of India represents the idea of peace among the people, adding if there is violence, murder, rape and hatred, then that is not India. And on Sunday, the second day of the visit, Gandhi pitched for tribal rights during a speech in Wayanad, where the Lok Sabha MP was on a 2-day visit. Calling tribal brothers and sisters the original owners of the country, Rahul said the Adivasis should be given right over land and forests.
See, there is the word Adivasi, which means the original owners of the land. And that also implies that the original owners of this country should be given rights on land, on forest, and should be allowed an imagination to do whatever they want.
He also said, and I quote, "As the original owners of the land, you should be able to have your children study engineering, become doctors, become lawyers, start businesses, know computers. But you should also get the rights in the forest. You should get the rights to land. You should get the right to forest produce," unquote. The visit comes after the Lok Sabha Secretariat on Monday restored the membership of Gandhi following the Supreme Court's stay on his conviction in a criminal defamation case over his 2019 remarks on the Modi surname. Gandhi was disqualified from the House in March this year following the conviction, and a 2-year jail term was awarded to him by a Surat court. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and was written and produced by me, Rahel Philipose, Shashank Bhargava, and Utsa Sarmin. It was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.